US defence officials say the last remaining American and NATO troops have left the Bagram military air base in Afghanistan and handed it over to Afghan forces. Bagram was the epicenter of the US and NATO's war against the Taliban and al-Qaida. At its peak, 100,000 US troops were stationed there. That 20-year mission is now coming to an end, and a complete withdrawal of all foreign forces from the country is thought to be imminent. I'm joined now by DW's NATO correspondent in Brussels, Terry Schultz. Terry, on Wednesday we saw German troops already removing their troops as part of that NATO contingent. They've now left Afghanistan. Now the main NATO base in Bagram is closing. It's all coming a little earlier than expected, though. Why is that?
Hi, Rebecca. Well, Bagram isn't actually closing. It's just being handed over to Afghan forces 100%, having been secured by NATO and US forces all of these 20 years. So this is really a big step because this is, of course, where NATO and US forces staged a lot of their operations. And it remains to be seen whether the Afghans can keep Bagram secured.
Now, the airbase in Bagram was the main airport for NATO people to get its people in and out of the country. Now, that's not just military staff. Of course, we're talking about diplomats as well. Well, what does this, not closure, as you say, but what does pulling out US and NATO troops from that airbase mean for the future, and particularly when it comes to security?
This remains to be seen because there is another airport, the civilian airport, elsewhere in town, and this too is primarily secured by Afghan forces. But there have been talks now for quite some time with Turkey that Turkey would secure the military side of that airport, and that would be a really important step because then, of course, the U.S. could keep some equipment there. When their diplomats and troops fly in and out, you would have a little bit more confidence in that side of the airport. But those talks have not concluded. I just checked this morning with sources, and it's really uncertain yet whether that agreement can be concluded with Turkey.
Now, Terry, the security situation in Afghanistan is, of course, unstable at the moment. There are fears of a civil war with the Taliban on the rise and warlords battling for power. After being nearly 20 years in Afghanistan, do NATO troops not have a certain responsibility to stay and help?
That's certainly an argument that has been made, and one that the U.S. and NATO considered. Once they made the decision, basically, came to the conclusion that this war was not one that they could win, that the Taliban could not be finally vanquished militarily, they really did rush to the exit. And this moving up of the deadline of U.S. troops to leave is something that we had heard rumored, moving it up from September 11th, which was the official deadline. But I would not be surprised that within the next couple of days, by the 4th of July, we hear that all U.S. troops are out of the country.
That is quite a speed up. Terry, tell us then what NATO achieved in its 20 years in Afghanistan.
The end chapter is not written yet, but signs do not look good. Even US and NATO commanders confirmed that the Taliban is retaking territory. Even before the pullout was announced, the Taliban controlled half the country. I mean, I think that's a statistic that would shock a lot of people after 20 years of US and NATO forces there. People on the ground are very scared. Without US and NATO forces there, a lot of the security that had been fragile but at least somewhat intact will be gone. And I think NATO would have a very hard time calling this a success story. And we've seen the U.S. dial back what it expected to achieve there to saying, well, we got Osama bin Laden, and that's what we were there for.
All right, DW correspondent Terry Schultz in Brussels, thank you very much for that.